The sky above Hive Tertius did not split with thunder. That was what arbitrator Hal Vase remembered most clearly later, when he tried to explain why the whole thing had felt wrong from the very first second. Warp breaches screamed. They bled color into the air. They made astropaths claw their own eyes out and sent untrained minds into seizures. They came with omens, with madness, with the sense that reality itself had been violated so badly that even the city's rusted bones could feel it. This one opened in silence. No warning sirens from the ecclesiarchy towers. No psychic shriek over the vox. No blood rain. No spontaneous fires bursting from shrine altars. One moment the smoke-clogged sky over Hive Tertius was the same dull bruise it had been for weeks. The next, a seam of green light appeared over the outer habstacks, precise and narrow, as if some invisible blade had cut the atmosphere from horizon to horizon. Then something fell out of it. Hal Vase watched through cracked magnoculars from the upper transit causeway while distant gunfire rolled across the hive like bad weather. The object came down in a sheet of emerald flame, not tumbling, not broken apart, but descending whole and hard like a shell fired by a god. It struck the outskirts of the Sumpgate district with enough force to send a shockwave through the superstructure. Rust shook loose from the support beams. Half a kilometer of flickering lumen strips died at once. Somewhere below, 1,000 frightened voices rose into one panicked scream. Then the green light vanished. The wound in the sky sealed. The clouds closed over. "Throne preserve us," Vase muttered. Hive Tertius had no room left in it for new disasters. Not anymore. The world of Charon's Reach had spent the last 2 standard months dying by degrees. First came labor stoppages in the lower manufactorums. Then food riots. Then the disappearances. Entire hab floors emptied overnight. Their occupants found days later butchered in sump tunnels or hanging from maintenance gantries in shapes no sane man could call religious. The local enforcers broke first. The Arbites took over second. The governor declared emergency law third. By then, it no longer mattered. The cult had already spread too far. No one in Hive Tertius said the name of the blood god aloud if they could help it. But everyone knew what was happening. Red glyphs painted in fresh gore. Chains forged into icons. Men and women who should have been terrified running into gunfire, laughing with their teeth broken out. The Underhive had become a wound. Every purge uncovered 3 more shrines. Every execution sparked 2 more riots. The city was not fighting an uprising anymore. It was drowning in one. And now, something had fallen out of a silent tear in reality. "Arbitrator," crackled the vox beat in Vase's ear. "Report." He kept the magnoculars trained on the smoking crater below. Through drifting dust and fire, he could see movement. Something large standing up. "Impact confirmed in Sumpgate 12, Vase said. "Single object, no secondary detonation. I'm moving to investigate." "Negative," came the immediate reply. "All available units are rerouting to the Basilica Quarter. Full cult breakout. Inquisition representative has assumed command authority. Return to Precinct Bastion 7. Vase did not answer for a moment. In the crater, the figure straightened fully. Too big for a normal man. Too broad, even through the smoke. Encased in armor of a dull, battle-scarred green, unlike any pattern Vase had ever seen in Imperial service. Not power armor, not carapace, not void suit plating. Something heavier, older. Built not for parade or doctrine, but for war in its ugliest form. A domed helm turned slowly, scanning the ruined avenue around him. One arm flexed. The other reached down and lifted a weapon from the shattered ground. Not a lasgun, not a bolter. Something brutal and mechanical, all squared angles and heavy metal. Primitive looking, in the same way an industrial press was primitive. Simple only because it had been designed to do one thing perfectly. The vox hissed again. "Arbitrator Vase. Acknowledge." "Negative acknowledged," Vase said calmly, and cut the channel. He slung the magnoculars, drew his bolt pistol, and ran for the stairwell. By the time he reached the lower concourse, the first cultists had already seen the crater. They came out of alleyways and maintenance shafts in 2s and 10s and then scores, drawn the way corpse flies found fresh meat. Vase saw them converging while he kicked his Arbite's bike to life and sent it screaming down the avenue toward the impact site. Some were half naked beneath worker rags, skin flayed and painted with blood. Some wore looted body armor hammered with brass runes. A few carried autoguns, but most had chain hooks, axes, cleavers, slaughter tools stolen from manufactorum lines and made sacred by repeated murder. All of them were running toward the thing in the crater. That alone told Vase everything he needed to know. Whatever had fallen out of the sky, the cult wanted it badly enough to break cover for it. He swung the bike sideways behind an overturned cargo tram and dismounted in one fluid motion, taking cover as the first wave rushed into the plaza below. The armored figure did not move until the cultists were almost on him. Then it moved so fast, Vase lost the rhythm of it. The stranger raised a compact firearm one-handed, and the nearest three cultists came apart in wet bursts, their torsos simply erased by the impact. Not blast burns, not bolt detonations. Solid projectiles, Vase realized dimly, but moving with such force that flesh and bone meant nothing to them. The figure pivoted left, fired twice more, and another pair dropped screaming, legs cut out from under them. Then the gun was gone, slung, discarded. Vase couldn't tell, and a heavier weapon was in its place, short-barreled and vicious. The second blast hit a charging knot of heretics and turned the center of them into red mist. No wasted shots, no battle cry, no flourish, just efficient annihilation. The cultists slammed into him from three sides anyway. One leapt for the stranger's back with a chain knife raised. The armored figure caught him by the throat in midair, hurled him through a plasteel storefront hard enough to collapse it, and drove a metal boot into another attacker's sternum so violently that the body folded backward. A third cultist swung an axe. The stranger stepped inside the blow, seized the man's wrist, and tore the entire arm off at the elbow. Vase had seen Space Marines once, at a distance, descending from a Valkyrie onto a rebel emplacements field on Carthan's Fall. He remembered the size of them, the impossible acceleration, the sense that they were not men enhanced, but war made flesh. This thing was not an Astartes. It was something colder. Within 30 seconds, nearly 40 cultists were dead. The last survivors began to falter, bloodlust giving way to animal panic. One dropped his weapon and tried to run. The green-armored warrior seized him by the back of the skull, lifted him bodily, and looked at the glyph carved into the man's chest. Then, for the first time, it seemed to understand exactly where it was. Something in its posture changed. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. The cultist screamed. The stranger snapped his neck with one hand and let the corpse fall. Then he looked toward the Hive's central spire, where deep in the iron heart of the city, the red glow of the uprising stained the clouds. And he started walking. Vase thumbed his Vox back on. Control. Control. This is Arbitrator Vase. Be advised, the impact object is mobile. Repeat, mobile, humanoid. Unknown classification. Armed and hostile to cult elements. Static. Then, return to Bastion. Arbitrator. Inquisitorial order. It just killed 40 heretics in less than a minute. That does not alter standing command. Vase looked down into the wreckage again, as the figure strode through drifting smoke without once glancing back at the dead. Around him, blood ran in gutters between broken flagstones. No hesitation. No doubt. No interest in trophies or survivors or witnesses. He moved like a missile that had finally found its target. Vase holstered his pistol, climbed back onto the bike, and gunned the engine. If the thing was heading into the Hive, then whatever waited there was worse than a mob of cultists. Much worse. In the governor's strategium, 3 kilometers above the lower haze line, Inquisitor Cale Mordain watched the city die on a tactical hololith and felt very little. He was old enough that his face had stopped looking human in any ordinary sense. The skin was too pale, too thin across the cheekbones, the eyes too sharp and dry, the mouth carved into that permanent expression Inquisitors seemed to acquire after enough years of deciding who deserved to live. He stood motionless in black plate beneath a tattered red cloak while data runes crawled around the projection table like insects. Every district marked in crimson was compromised. Every flashing skull icon represented another confirmed cult site, another slaughter, another chapel or factorum gone over to the blood god. The lower hive was nearly lost. The mid-level transit loops were collapsing into firefights, and beneath it all, hidden beneath steel and filth and 10,000 years of expansion, the primary ritual locus was still active. The cult was not rioting for its own sake. It was buying time. Say it again, Mordain said. Magos Logister Hest leaned closer over his cogitator rig, mechadendrites twitching in agitation. Energy discharge pattern remains inconsistent with known teleportarium signatures. No warp, audible precursor, no daemonic bloom, no residual empiric contamination above baseline thresholds. So it is not a warp breach, not in the conventional sense. Governor Selvin, sweating through silk underlayers he had no business wearing during a citywide insurrection, swallowed visibly. Then whatever came through might not be heretical. Mordain turned his head and fixed the governor with such absolute contempt that the man shrank without being touched. On the contrary, Mordain said softly, anything capable of arriving in my jurisdiction by means I do not understand is heretical until proven otherwise. A servo skull descended on whining grav impellers and projected fresh picked feed over the hololith. Grainy black and red footage from a HAB security camera showed the plaza massacre in jerking fragments. Cultists swarming, then dying in sprays of gore, then flying apart beneath weapons no one in the chamber could identify. The final still frame captured the armored figure half-turned toward the camera. Olive drab plating, scarred helm. On one pauldron, barely visible beneath ash and blood, a symbol, like a jagged sword, thrust through a circle. Mordain stared at it for 3 silent seconds. Not Imperial, he said. No known forge origin, the Magos confirmed. Armor composition unknown. Weapon systems disparate and technologically contradictory. Several appear chemically propelled. Others emit directed energy beyond current Mechanicus schema. Xenos? Asked the governor, hopeful in the way frightened officials always were when offered categories. A lone infiltrator? Some mercenary construct? No, said Mordain. Something else. He enlarged another section of the feed, one showing the entity standing over a dead cultist and examining a fresh-carved rune of Khorne. He knows what he is looking at, Mordain said. That concerns me more than the arrival itself. At the chamber entrance, something heavy moved. All heads turned as Brother Captain Roth entered with his kill team. Deathwatch. Even after all his years, Mordain still approved of the effect they had on rooms. 5 transhuman giants in black armor crossed the strategium like the final argument in a theological dispute. Silver left pauldrons gleamed. Chapter heraldry marked the right. Ultramarines, Black Templars, Iron Hands, Raven Guard, Space Wolves. 5 very different killers united beneath the Long Watch. Roth removed his helm. His face was pale granite, scored with old scars. Inquisitor. Brother Captain, Mordain said. You have reviewed the feeds. I have. And? Ralph looked at the still image of the green-armored warrior. He kills the servants of chaos with conviction. That is not the same as loyalty. No, Roth agreed. But it is not nothing. Mordain clasped his hands behind his back. The ritual center remains active. This entity is moving toward it through the lower corridors, eliminating cult assets as it goes. Your team will intercept. If possible, determine its nature. If necessary, destroy it. If it reaches the central locus before you and interferes with the ritual, you will exploit the disruption. And if it proves neither ally nor enemy, Mordain's expression did not change. Then make it one. Roth held his gaze, then nodded once. It will be done. As the kill team turned to leave, the governor found the courage to speak again. Inquisitor, if this unknown warrior is hunting the cult, could we not use that? Direct him? Coordinate with… No, Mordain said. The governor fell silent. Mordain stepped closer to the hololith, watching the green rune that marked the stranger's progress through the hive. Straight toward the corruption, straight toward the ritual source, straight through districts even Arbite's assault cadres had failed to reclaim. No fear, no deviation, no visible confusion. Mordain had spent a lifetime studying monsters, and he had learned one truth that never failed him. The most dangerous beasts were not the ones that raged. They were the ones that knew exactly what they wanted. The Doomslayer moved through the Underhive like judgment given mass. He did not know this world's name. He did not care. He knew only the signs. The iron stink of blood spilled for worship instead of hunger. The corrupted geometry scratched into walls and arterial spirals. The pressure in the air before a tear in reality. The chemical taste of violence sanctified into ritual. Different language, different architecture, different species of human fear, but the same infection, the same warp-sick resonance behind it. Hell had many dialects. He had learned long ago that their differences did not matter. The first shrine he found was built into a collapsed transit chapel. Human bodies wired to the pillars. Brass skulls stacked around a furnace-mouth altar. A bound prisoner still alive at the center. Mouth sewn shut. Chest opened carefully enough to keep the heart beating. The Slayer crossed the room in 3 strides, tore the nearest cultist in half with his bare hands, and shot the altar apart with the combat shotgun before the others finished turning. 5 dead in 2 seconds. The prisoner died anyway. Too much blood loss. Too much time. The Slayer stood over the cooling corpse for a moment, helm angled down. Then he kept moving. He encountered resistance every 100 meters after that. Packs of cultists, gunmen behind barricades, frenzied devotees who hurled themselves screaming from ductwork and maintenance shafts. Twice. Things that were no longer human. One had fused chain teeth where its jaw should have been and tried to drag itself through the air on elongated arms. Another burst from a vat of sump runoff on 6 bony limbs, flesh translucent with warp mutation, and spat acid that hissed across his greaves. They died as everything died. Shotgun at breath range, heavy cannon in disciplined bursts, chainsaw when ammunition was wasteful, knife, gauntlet, boot, wall, floor, momentum. The city around him had become a factory for sacrifice. Every hallway bore fresh signs of it. Children's sleeping alcoves emptied to make room for ritual circles. Cogitator terminals gutted and draped in skin. Vox stations broadcasting chants instead of orders. He saw where ordinary people had tried to resist. Barricaded hab doors, homemade weapons lying beside butchered hands, blood trails leading nowhere. He kept walking. At a junction beneath the old refinery quarter, he paused. His suit had adapted quickly. Environmental analyzers mapped chemical taint, thermal bloom, electromagnetic distortion, and beneath all of it, a deeper reading. A pulse, rhythmic, growing stronger toward the hive core. Not argent, not exactly, but adjacent to it in all the ways that mattered. A dimensional pressure point, a wound being widened from the other side. A portal was opening. The Slayer reloaded with mechanical certainty and moved faster. Above him, in the ventilation dark, something tracked him. He led it. The kill team had his trail long before they had visual contact. Brother Neemed of the Iron Hands knelt beside a ruined barricade of worker plating and scorched bone. "Impact dispersion inconsistent with bolt weaponry," he said. "Solid rounds. High velocity. Significant kinetic transfer." He lifted half of a severed autogun from the debris. Close-range blunt trauma also present. Extreme force. "Meaning?" asked Routh. "Meaning whatever he is, he kills efficiently." Brother Severin of the Raven Guard emerged soundlessly from the shadows at the intersection ahead. Movement. 3 corridors north. Cult elements in retreat. Roth signaled advance. They found the retreating cultists first, if found was the word for stepping over the dead, while the last survivors still screamed farther up the tunnel. One man with both legs missing clawed feebly at a chain axe he could no longer lift. Another had been pinned to a support strut by a metal spike through the face. A third was still alive, only because half his chest had not yet decided to stop moving. The Space Wolves veteran Hakan laughed once under his breath. "By Russ, I almost like him." Brother Merrick, the Black Templar, did not. "He is unknown. That is enough." Then the corridor ahead erupted in green-white light. The kill team snapped weapons up and surged forward into a chamber of shattered machinery just in time to see the stranger finish killing something that had once been a man. It was large even by mutant standards, swollen with unnatural muscle and horned growths, carrying a crude power maul in one hand and the remains of an Imperial officer's torso in the other. The green-armored warrior caught the descending maul on his forearm, twisted, shattered the creature's elbow, and drove a wrist blade through its skull in one savage motion. Before the body finished dropping, he was already turning toward the next target, toward them. For one frozen instant, both sides assessed the other. 5 Adeptus Astartes in black. One towering green killer amid a floor of bodies. Then Merrick fired. The corridor became war. Bolter shells screamed through recycled air and detonated against steel. The Slayer moved before the first impacts landed. rolling behind a fractured pressure tank as mass reactive rounds turned it into a storm of fragments. He came up, firing the heavy cannon from the hip. Bursts so precise they struck joints and optics instead of armor plate. Brother Cassian of the Ultramarines took one round across the helm grill and staggered half a step. Disciplined marksmanship, Cassian voxed. Suppress and flank, Routh ordered. Hakon charged with chainsword roaring, trusting his speed and his plate. The Slayer met him head-on. For the first time in 3 centuries of war, Hakon found himself grappling with something that felt like an Astartes in strength, an utterly alien in technique. No ritualized forms, no chapter doctrinal chains, no flourish. The Slayer dropped beneath the chainsword line, slammed an armored shoulder into Hakon's midsection hard enough to crack plating, hooked a leg behind the Space Wolf's knee, and threw him bodily through a gantry rail. Merrick hit the stranger from the side with a powered strike that would have pulped an Ogren. The Slayer absorbed the blow on one forearm guard, pivoted, and answered with a backhand that rang off ceramite like a hammer against a bell. Merrick reeled. Not wounded, shocked. Severin appeared behind the Green Warrior with combat blade drawn for the neck seal. The Slayer half-turned as if he had eyes in the back of the helm, caught Severin's wrist, and drove him face first into the wall. Ceramite cracked. Severin vanished into shadow, a heartbeat later by instinct alone. Then Brother Neemed opened up with a heavy bolter. The chamber vanished in thunder. The Slayer broke contact instantly, diving through the barrage in a way that should have been impossible for anything that size. Explosions chased him up a collapsed conveyor spine. He swapped weapons mid-motion. Roth saw the movement, did not understand it, then understood when a ball of incandescent green energy smashed into the machinery beside Neemed and blew half the firing platform into molten ruin. Unknown plasma analog, Cassian flagged. Alive, if possible, Roth barked, even as he himself lunged with power sword ignited. He reached the stranger in a shower of sparks and steel. The alien warrior, Xenos, mutant, Daemon. Roth no longer cared, which caught the first power sword blow on the haft of some compact firearm. Let the weapon be cut in half rather than fight the angle, and drove an elbow into Roth's gorget with enough force to make his autosenses flash white. Roth answered with a punch from his power fist. The Slayer slipped inside its arc, seized the oversized gauntlet with both hands, and used Roth's own momentum to throw the Deathwatch captain over his hip into a bank of cogitator columns. Silence lasted perhaps 1/3 of a second. Then the whole chamber groaned. The stranger had severed a support manifold during the fight. Back! Cassian warned. The ceiling came down between them in an avalanche of rusted decking, broken conduits, and 30 tons of collapsing infrastructure. Dust and steam filled the tunnel. Auspec's contact vanished. When it settled, the chamber was cut in two. He chose the collapse, Severin said from somewhere in the smoke. Roth rose from shattered machinery, helmetless now, blood running from a split brow. He stared at the blocked passage and felt an emotion he had not expected. Respect. Track him, he said. The central ritual chamber had once refined promethium for half the Hive's defense batteries. Now it refined blood. The vast cylinders that had once stored fuel were full of it, dark and thick and stirred by machinery never meant for organic matter. Catwalks had become sacrificial galleries. The control floor was covered in brass sigils welded directly into the metal. Hundreds of cultists ringed the central platform in concentric circles, each chanting in a low, a rhythmic growl that made the air feel greasy. Above the altar hung a tier in reality the size of a gunship. It did not yet open fully. It pulsed, flexed, breathed. On the other side of it, things moved. Lord Ascendant Varrock stood at the altar's edge and listened to the city scream through the walls. Once he had been only a shift overseer, then a gang patron, then a preacher in secret chambers below the habstacks. Now he was remade, taller by a head than any mortal man, skin fused with plates of brass-black growth, one horn curling from the left side of his skull. One eye replaced by a molten red lens that saw into the warp when it pleased his god. His chain axe was taller than the women dragging the next sacrifice toward him. The pressure builds, said the sorcerer Leor at his side, voice dry as flayed parchment. The veil weakens. Another 9 minutes and the first of them will step through. Varrock bared metal teeth in something like a smile. Good? Lior's hands moved over the altar, directing currents of blood and psychic force into the widening tier. Your dead acolytes buy us time, but not much. The hunter comes. I know. He has torn through 7 shrines, 3 warbands, a lesser manifestation. He is not slowing. Good, Varak repeated, and this time his smile sharpened. Let him come. Let him see what waits here, Lior frowned. You speak as if this is sport. It is judgment. The sorcerer's staff pulsed. Images bloomed briefly in the vapor above it. The green armored figure walking through smoke. Cultists dying in sprays of bone. A black armored giant hurled through a wall. A shrine collapsing in flame. Lior hissed. That thing is not of this reality. Not Imperial. Not ours. The warp recoils from him strangely. Varak set the teeth of his axe roaring. All the better. The blood god delights in worthy skulls. Before Lior could answer, the bulkhead at the far end of the chamber exploded inward. The blast wave hurled cultists from the nearest catwalks. Red light bent. Sirens died. Smoke rolled across the floor. Through the breach walked the Slayer. He took in the chamber at a glance. Portal, anchor points, human batteries, champion, sorcerer. Priority sorted itself instantly. The nearest cultists charged because that was what they had been taught to do. The minigun spun. A lane of death opened straight through them. The front rank vanished beneath a torrent of rounds that tore limbs free and ripped torsos open. Bodies behind them jerked and fell before they understood they were already dead. The Slayer strode into the firestorm he created, cutting left, then right, then left again, as if the slaughter were choreography only he could hear. When a knot of autogunners tried to rise on the upper gantry, the rocket launcher spoke once, and the entire platform became shrapnel. Varak roared and leapt from the altar. He hit the deck hard enough to dent it, chain axe already descending. The Slayer slid beneath the blow as sparks sprayed from the floor, came up inside the giant's reach, and rammed the super shotgun into Varak's abdomen, point blank. The blast tore armor and flesh open together. Varak staggered, then laughed. Yes. He swung with his free hand, a backhand like a pile driver. The Slayer took the hit, skidded 3 meters, recovered before the slide ended, and answered with the ballista. The charged bolt punched through Varak's shoulder, exploded out his back, and still the champion came on through smoke and blood, as if pain were only proof he remained alive. Around them the ritual continued. Lior screamed for the faithful not to stop. Blood poured into channels. The tier above the altar widened another meter. A clawed silhouette pressed from the other side, testing the membrane. The Slayer saw it. So did Varak. Too late! The champion snarled, and brought the chain axe down in a vertical chop meant to split armor and skull alike. The Slayer caught the haft under one forearm, seized the spinning teeth housing with the other hand, and forced it sideways an inch at a time against Varak's full strength. Brass teeth chewed sparks from his gauntlet. The floor beneath both of them cracked. Then he headbutted Varak. Once, twice. On the third impact, the horn snapped off. Varak howled and threw himself backward, wrenching the axe free. The Slayer drew the crucible. Red energy flared. For the first time, true fear touched the chamber. Lior felt it in the warp. The portal itself shuddered. No! The sorcerer shrieked, and hurled a spear of empiric force across the floor. The blast hit the Slayer in the side, and wrapped him in crackling crimson arcs. Lesser men would have burned from within. The green armor system screamed warnings across the visor. The Slayer turned his head toward Lior through the lightning and took one deliberate step forward anyway. Then another. Then another. He was still walking when the psychic blast guttered out. Varak charged to buy the sorcerer time. The Slayer met him in a collision that shook the altar. Crucible blade against chain axe housing. Fists against brass plate. Varak struck like a berserk engine. Every blow empowered by devotion and mutation. The Slayer struck like inevitability. He gave ground only when it improved the angle. Took punishment only when it opened a shorter line to kill. Varak buried an elbow into the Slayer's helm. The Slayer answered by stamping sideways through the champion's knee. Bone and metal snapped together. Varak dropped half a level. The chain axe swung upward in desperation. The Slayer took the wrist, twisted, and severed the entire arm at the bicep with the crucible. Varak screamed praise to Khorne with his last breath. The Slayer rammed the blade through his chest, out through the spine, and pinned the champion to the altar. Then he ripped the weapon free and turned toward the sorcerer. Leor had already begun the final invocation. Blood lifted from the channels and ropes. The cultists' voices rose into a single howl. The tier overhead yawned wider, and now a face could be seen there, vast, horned, wrong, forcing itself toward manifestation through the skin of reality. The Slayer holstered the crucible and raised the plasma rifle. Leor brought every remaining ounce of power down like a hammer. The chamber filled with red fire. When it cleared, the sorcerer was still standing. The Slayer was still walking. A single plasma shot took Leor's staff in the center and detonated it. The backlash vaporized the sorcerer from the hands inward, but the portal did not close. Too much blood had been fed into it, too much momentum, too many dead. The chanting broke at last as cultists realized both of their masters were gone. The Slayer killed the first rank before panic finished reaching the last. Heavy cannon, precision bursts, head, throat, heart, head, head, head. He turned the minigun on the bloodvats next. Armor-piercing fire ripped them open in sheets. Rivers of black-red fluid flooded across the deck, drowning the glowing channels. The portal convulsed, shrank by half, then surged again. The thing behind it roared. Time for the last resort. The BFG came up in both hands. Across the chamber, through smoke and red light, the Deathwatch finally reached the shattered threshold and froze. Even Roth, who had watched Titans duel on racks and demonic engines climb bastion walls on Valcor, had no immediate language for what he was seeing. The Green Warrior standing alone amid a pile of mutilated heretics. A champion of chaos dead on the altar. A sorcerer reduced to ash. A portal into the immaterium hanging unstable over the ruin, and in the warrior's hands, a weapon whose energy signature overloaded every Auspex rune in his helm at once. He is trying to close it, Cassian said. Ovin it, Merrick snapped. Routh looked from the impossible gun to the clawed monstrosity forcing itself through the tear. Hol, he ordered. The Slayer fired. The BFG projectile entered the portal like a second sun. For one insane instant, nothing happened. Then the thing on the other side screamed. Emerald arcs burst through the tier in every direction, lashing to metal, flesh, runework, and corrupted blood alike. Cultists, still alive, died where they stood. Skeletons flashing visible through skin, before both became ash. The portal imploded around the energy sphere inside it, collapsed, expanded, and then tore itself apart from within in a storm of green fire and black warp discharge. The shockwave hit like a god's fist. The Deathwatch braced behind storm shields and armored bulk. The Slayer stood in the center of it, unmoving, cape of dust and blood whipping around him as the impossible pressure passed over. When it ended, the ritual chamber was gone in all but shape. The altar had become slag. The vats were ruptured husks. Every sigil on the deck had been burned clean. The portal was gone. Reality had won. For now, silence held. Roth stepped forward first. Bolter lowered, but not by much. His kill team spread with practiced caution. Every angle covered. The green-armored warrior turned to face them. He did not raise a weapon. He did not lower one either. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then Routh removed his helm and spoke across the ruins in a voice that had ordered men into death and seen them obey gladly. You fought the servants of the archenemy, he said. You destroyed the breach. State your allegiance. The stranger said nothing. Not ignorance. Not confusion. Deliberate silence. Routh tried again. Name yourself. Still nothing. Then a new light opened behind the warrior. Not red. Not warp crimson. Not the bruised mauve of teleportariums. Pure green, cut with machine geometry and held stable by means no Imperial system recognized. A portal, but not of chaos, not of the Imperium. A gate coming to reclaim its own. Brother Neemed swore binary litanies over a spiking Auspex. Technology signature impossible. No warp resonance. No... He is leaving, Severin said. Routh took one step forward. Stop. The stranger looked at him once. There was no hatred in that gaze. No triumph. No plea for understanding. Only the terrible, absolute focus of a thing that had seen hell too many times to be impressed by another variant of it. Then the Doomslayer stepped backward into the green light and vanished. The portal collapsed soundlessly. Only cooling metal and drifting ash remained. Arbitrator Halvez saw the aftermath an hour later and knew immediately that no report he filed would ever survive contact with the Inquisition. The ritual chamber looked as if an orbital strike had gone off inside it. Astartes stood among the wreckage like black statues. Inquisitorial stormtroopers sealed access routes. Servo skulls floated through the haze, recording everything for archives. Vase would never be permitted to read. He found one of the Deathwatch by a broken catwalk, the one with the wolf pelt worked into his armor trim. "What happened here?" Vase asked before he could stop himself. The Space Marine turned his scarred face toward him. For a moment, Vase thought he might simply be ignored. Instead, the giant glanced across the chamber at the spot where the altar had stood. "A hunter came," the Astartes said, "and Hell discovered it was prey. That was all." Inquisitor Mordain's final report, drafted 3 days later beneath triple seal and machine cipher, ran to 12,000 words and explained almost nothing.